Right then. So, thank you all for coming. This talk is testing with services. So who am I? I am Tom Bloor, also known as TV Sliver, and my speaker notes are so tiny I can't see them from the other side of the screen. There we go, now I can actually read them. I work at Shadowcat Systems as a developer, but I also do sysadmin, DevOps, project manager, basically any other thing Mark throws at me. I'm also, and Mark's not my dad. For anybody who's confused about this, Mark is not my dad, and there's been at least 2 people at this conference that have been confused by that. Whatever. I'm a member of my local hackspace. In fact, I'm a board member of that. And also I volunteer at a lot of tech conferences, and a lot of the times these days I'm actually the video monkey, so you'll have seen me running around like a blue-ass fly today and yesterday, because I'm sorting out all the video kit at the same time. So in this talk I'll be going over some of the mechanisms I've come up for testing, and how you can spin up dedicated services for testing, such as Apache or Postgres, and we probably will have time. What steps you need to take to actually spin up an Nginx in a folder in your home directory without any, and that just works. I haven't got around to making the module for that. So, first problem we've got, when you're writing software, you have people writing software on your systems, there's a lot of things which are assumed, like the web server will just work, the database will be there and the version you expect, and the file system will have the access rights you expect. You could also be looking after a system which relies on Apache or Postgres for a core functionality, or maybe you're using mod Perl or mod PHP, God forbid, or you require send file, which is actually a fairly regular requirement. Or it's, oh sugar, one too many clicks. Oh, it's actually running using an Apache module extra you need, and you need to test that that actually works with your system. So you've written a custom module for cookie authentication. I've got a client that I'd spent far too long trying to fix that. So obviously, with this sort of testing, there's always a manual method. You know, spin it up behind an Apache process, click the button, make sure it works. You know, make a checklist of all the bits you do, but this gets tedious and you're prone to errors, and you can also miss steps. Automating something like this would be great. However, can you be sure that everything is going to work together with Apache and the front end or Postgres at the back end? So, first we'll go over spinning up an Apache process completely manually in a folder. Sorry if I'm teaching you all to suck eggs, but I had to learn a lot of these bits, and some of this is actually really unknown information that you have to dig up out of the middle of nowhere. So the first bit you need is just the basic config file. In fact, there are 3 things you need in this config file to get Apache to start. That's the PID file listing, config, the listen port, and an include for your modules, as well as 2 basic modules, an npm module of some description, like prefork, and in at least in 2.4, and I think in 2.2, you require auth core as standard for it to actually start. I think that may have come in 2.4. I can't quite remember. It's been a while since I looked in it, and I just include it by default because. So a basic Apache config file with that looks like that. You'll probably be very familiar with that lot of arguments. However, it's well, and you need at least one one of the npm modules, an auth core module, in one of those folders as a symlink, as done by A2N mod. So, with the following extra part, that's a full Apache service, done, ready to go. Obviously, the final step is to actually start it. So, HTTPD or Apache 2 or Apache, whatever your process is called, your service is called, the directory for the server root, and the actual path in there to the config, because it's not clever enough to just go for a relative file. You have to specify the full path. Don't ask me why. It would make sense if it was only looked in there, but Apache for you. However, this will use the default items for your mods. So this will pull out of etc Apache 2 mods enabled. So whatever you've got installed, which is normally npm prefork and authcore and a couple of, I think, MIME on a standard system, that's what it will pull out and start itself up with. So you could create your own set in your own custom mods folder. So you just copy it over. Copy all the mods available into wherever you want to actually spin your server directory you defined earlier. At which point, you can just symlink all the bits over. As this is manually symlink in mods enabled out to mods available for npm prefork, authcore, and then start it up as you did before, and it's loaded just the modules you've wanted. So doing this manually sucks. You know, you've got, especially if you're doing this for every test, because obviously you want your tests to run separately and not interact, not affect each other. So that if you run one test that's where it's running with an extra module, the other test doesn't need that module but is affected by it. You don't want one of them failing because it's got the module included. There was actually a module already for that. Apache test dates back to when Apache 1 came out, and it's got a lot of cruft from then. It's really useful for, well, it was used as a base module for Apache modules, so testing auth cookie and various other Perl modules that are designed to, that are already included in core for it. However, the method for setting up is arcane. Not very well documented, ridiculously hard to configure, and also requires your own config script to actually, sorry, I did it again, your own custom test wrapper script, and for all your tests to be in a particular format and in a particular way, and it gives you no actual ability to reach in and change the modules as we just did. So with Apache test, I actually spent 2 days digging through this test module thing, and I thought, well, why do I need to generate a completely custom makefile for running the tests, creating a custom test runner that includes their specific module, to eventually find out that it only runs the tests behind the GET request in Apache itself, rather than on the request. But that's useful for testing plugins. No use for if you're actually trying to make sure that your application is working behind Apache. And it's ridiculously hard to maintain because I still couldn't get the darn thing to start up. So where to actually start? Well, the first bit is the config file. Now, in Perl, there is a module called config general, which is designed for config files, but not Apache configs. The syntax is identical. So that's why it was created, because people are very used to creating Apache config files, and they could just write the config file and Perl will parse it, and you don't have to worry about anything else at all. However, in Apache configs, order matters. In config general, it comes up as a hash or a dictionary, which means that for security reasons, they don't keep the keys in the key and value pairs in the same order in the hash, because that leads to various security issues and repeat attacks and God knows what else. There's a lot of random security bugs in that. With this config as well, we don't need to parse it back, so that makes it really simple. It's a write only. We only have to create the config and then start the process up. And if you look at it through the side view with your tongue at the right angle, it looks a bit like an array. So you can simplify it down to an array. So this is actually an array of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items with an extra array of 4. And you've got the PID file, path to PID, listen, virtual host, as an actual wrapper for another object. So that would be the bit that's in the square brackets. Not square brackets, chevrons is the correct term. So after all that, the next step is to actually copy the files across. You've got your config file, you parse it out from that into the correct place. I was going to put the string up for how to do that, but I looked at it and went, I barely remember how that works. So I'll come back to that later. So next step is copying it over. And in fact, I use a module called IOAll. So IO object, point it to the original directory, and just tell it to copy it. And it just copies the files in there, straight across, no quibble, done. And that will actually work on, if you actually wanted a module to do anything in Perl on any operating system, that will work on Windows, Mac, Solaris, insert operating system here. May even work on Arduino, but don't quote me on that. So the next thing for that is to find the actual program itself, which you use which. There's actually a module in Perl for finding which. It's called file find which. But on Debian systems and on various other bits, Apache is in sbin, which is not normally in path. So to find it, you need to mangle your path slightly. However, that's generally a bad thing to do, unless you can actually localize the variable. So this bit takes your path, splits it on colon as it's done, and then does a find, copy, replace on anything ending in bin, changing it to sbin, and then either puts it in or puts in the original if it didn't match, and maps that back in with a join into a local variable for that. So when you then run when you next run which inside this scope, it uses that env, not your original one, and you haven't just stomped all over your own original path, because that's a bad idea to do, and anything that mangles path is generally bad practice, because you never know what else you've done it in a particular order. So after they've got that, you've spun it up, you've got it running, because the next thing is just shell out to a thing and run the HTTPD command. I told you it doesn't like me. It was working fine on that. Is kill it, like I want to kill this projector. So I borrowed from another module called Daemon Control, which is actually designed to be a init wrapper that you can call on any process, and designed specifically to be written in Perl, pure Perl, so you can actually include it in any module and just run it. I've not actually included it. I just borrowed the one bit I need, which was the kill commands. Term, wait 10 seconds. Term, int, kill it. Just die. Kill -9. And when you're running this pattern, it takes up to 40 seconds. It'll keep checking each time it tries it, and then it might not go away. If it doesn't, that's your own problem. Something's probably exploded. Say Apache, something is still trying to talk to it. I think Postgres will not take a kill -9 command, for example. I know Apache will, and just die on its ass. But I think Postgres might actually wait until the link's gone. But that's killing that. Of course, all these various parts can then, instead of having to make a custom test wrapper and various other bits, you can just include it like that. So create a new test instance Apache object with the config that you need, and you can put any config that you need. And obviously, if you need it in chevrons, you just put that in as a single string, so you can do whatever you want in there. Set the document route, set server name. You could even do forwarding to a separate process if you're doing a proxy forward or reverse proxy. An array of all the modules require, and then start it. And when this object goes out of scope, it will destroy it and do the multi-term int kill as required. And then, in the same file, you can just use test where mechanize or any preferred testing instance you want, or shell out to another programming language, passing the port number, because it's got its own custom port number that's not interrupting anybody else. Pass it that, and then do your tests in whatever language you prefer. So you end up with a one thing, nice and easy to read wrapper for whatever test framework you want. And in fact, if you're writing things in Python, you don't actually have to leave the Perl script to do that, because you could use something like inline Python to just write Python straight in line with your Perl. Or bash. You can just shell out to a standard shell script. So this module is actually already on CPAN as test instance Apache. And if you want to have a look at the code easily, it's on GitHub. PR's welcome. And I'm using it in the wild, and there's at least one other person currently using this in the wild. There's probably more. I haven't actually looked at my download statistics on Meta CPAN yet, but there's probably a few people using this. So let's have a look at Postgres. Postgres is actually a lot easier, massively more easier. In fact, it's almost as if it was designed for doing this. So the first thing you need to do is your DB root. This command will actually set it up exactly as you get it when you do a apt-get install Postgres on Ubuntu, Debian, probably on various other general Linuxes. I don't know about it's probably not the same on FreeBSD or any of the BSDs, but that's because I haven't got a machine to play on at the moment. And let's make it work on the stuff I use every day and then make it work on everybody else's. So this is reasonably secure. As you know, Postgres comes with, it's auth trust for the Postgres username, but that's only on local loops, only when you're running this as the Postgres user, or if you're going through a local host thing and know the port and endpoint and all that bit. You can actually set a password. With that bit, you either use pwprompt, which will ask you for a password to set for the Postgres user, on init, or set a file for it. At which point, when you're automating this sort of stuff, you can set a password file and just copy that over. I think it's unencrypted, though. So there may be a way to use a SHA-512 or something like that, encrypted one. Read the docs for that. I was actually surprised it even did that. So after that, all you need to do is start it using the same folder, an extra log file, a listen port, and somewhere for it to put the Unix socket. In fact, that one took me ages to find because it's not documented as the Unix socket. It's documented as some other config variable that it doesn't tell you we're actually using that for. Which looks like that. PG control, the database folder we did in the previous init, a log file, which is where it puts it out, and then extra options. These options overwrite what's in the default file. So you could just try and start it on the default file, but then it collides with, I think it's 5432 is the default Postgres port. So I set 9000 because I was testing on that. And -k is the option for the Unix socket, and I've just told it to use dot, which is actually relative to that folder. So it will actually put the Unix socket in the database folder that you've defined. You could also set another path if you want. And then the usual command, start, at which point it spins up in the background and goes. 2 commands, you have a whole Postgres instance. And if you want to stop it, change that end one to stop. In fact, you don't need the PG log or any of this bits. You just need that command so it knows where to look for the PID file to actually stop it with. And you can do restart, reload, edit the PGHBA, whatever you need to in there. So there is actually very little magic for that. Very simple to do. And there's actually already a module out there. Test PostgreSQL. It's not bad, but I've found it hard to debug when you're doing some clever thing, when you're trying to do something slightly cleverer, like actually set the port to something non-standard, because it defaults to trying to trying to use 5432, and then supposedly it tries 5433, 5434, so on and so forth. But that part of the process doesn't work, and I haven't figured out why, because then I don't know. It's swirly Perl code that's been there for a long time. Obviously, yeah, few issues with port numbers, and which gives you problems with trying to run multiple instances of it at a time. I've actually had a time when I needed 3 running at once in a test framework for replication and for just multiple databases that weren't going to stomp on each other for multiple versions. And then I ran it concurrently with 5 tests at once, and my system fell over, but that's because I was running on a 2 gig VM with 1 core. I ran out of work. It ran out of juice. So, using that module is really easy. Almost a lot easier than the previous one because you don't have to set any of those other variables. Just call new, and then you can get the DSN, which you can pass into a standard DBI endpoint, or you can get username, password, port out of it, and then either carry on using, instantiate your database as you need to with it, and then shell out to whatever you want. As I said, inline Python, shell out to a Ruby script, who cares? Combine those two, you now have database and web server spun up specifically for your test as you need it, with all the config you require. You could even, if you've got your templating engine nearby that can create a template for your Apache config, for example, you can just tell the Apache to just look straight at it. Shut up, phone. Yeah, it's work. Now, I would have loved to actually have that working in its own new module. However, well, it's in the same namespace, test instance Postgres. It's not on CPAN yet because it's still under development. However, if you want to follow development, it's on my GitHub at test instance Postgres. And if you see any patches, although while it's still in dev, it's fairly obvious it needs patches. But any comments or ideas that you have of what would be nice, like proper parsing of PGHBA, ability to automatically spin up a full replica system that's with the WAL logs and all that shite sorted, or with the ability to spin it up and modify it as you need to. Obviously, parsing of the Postgres config file, which is, I think, an ini style. Is it ini style, I think? I can't remember offhand for the actual format. So, how long have I got? 10:52. When am I on till? Quarter past. Well, I've got plenty of time, actually. I've gone a bit fast. Any questions at this point? Docker.
Could you be doing all this by running a Docker command?
Yes, but if you're running this on a test, if you're running this, you can actually use this inside Travis, which is already inside Docker, and I don't think it plays nicely if you run Docker inside Docker, because I heard you like your things in your things, so we set them all on fire. In fact, test instance Apache is tested against every single version of Perl since 5.14 up to 5.24 on Travis CI, because, well, free CI, let's use it. It also means that if you are in a place which has either a policy against using Docker, or whatever, for whatever reason, or you have another custom thing you don't like you using on Kubernetes, you could also just use this on that. You could use this to actually, with that script, just set while one in the script, and it just sits there. So you can actually just do a full setup and leave it running. Just pass out the variables you need on whatever system if it doesn't have a Postgres instance set up ready to go. Or you need multiple ones set up with custom variables and stuff like that for a lot easier. This is mainly for developers, I find, a lot of the time, but can be useful for sysadmins if they want to actually set up an extra test against that using fairly simple scripts without having to worry about it. So you can spin it all up, set a couple of envars, and tell your developers to use these envars, and then it all just works. You had a question? No? Okay.
You may have covered this, and maybe a stupid question. What about injecting data into the Postgres as part of your test? Just use SQL, or is there any?
Yeah, you can. So with that, you could just just slurp the whole file into a variable and pass it to a DBI do instance of that. Or I think PG control gives you access to the PSQL command, at which point you can just shell it in. In fact, I've done that a few times on things. Also, if you've got a version schema system, for example, one of the things I use is DBIX class deployment handler, which gives you a full version schema with SQL changes for whatever database it understands, which includes Postgres, MySQL, SQLite, Firebase. there's about 30, it includes Oracle on there. And it will write the SQL you require, but also will read it in and run it on the database as needed when you're doing updates, upgrades, downgrades, multiple different named versions if you really want to do that way. So there are actually ways of doing that. This is more of a, how do you get an instance that you can then put that data into? Because using the production database is such a good plan. I still need more mind bleach.
Do you have the hook in the module to sort of say, okay, fire up my Postgres, and then post that step, suck in initialization?
Not yet, but if you would like it, I can make an extra module for it. Yeah. I mean, I could probably do that actually. It would not be a bad plan to have an automatically deployed schema, actually, because if you're using test Postgres or test instance Postgres, you will probably want, you'll probably have DBI already installed, which is the database interface for Perl. At which point, then yeah, I could just make a script that will take in a schema.sql file and a database definition, so you can set whatever you want, and then it will run that SQL against it. Yeah, that's actually not a bad idea, because test Postgres as it stands doesn't. You have to do that all manually. Although you can, I mean, PSQL will just shell out to it. Other thing, actually, I just remembered, test PostgreSQL does not let you choose which version you're using unless you set a variable with the proper home for it. So if it can't find that, it will try and use the newest version of Postgres, which if you're actually using not the newest version, but you're planning to upgrade to it later, you might want to actually spin up a 9.5 and a 9.3 or an 8.1. However, my module at the moment doesn't support it. Actually, here's a quick poll. How many people here are using Postgres from that's older than version 9? What are you doing? How many people still have a version of Postgres pre-9 in production? What version are you actually using?
Not actually sure. It's a CentOS default one. So.
Right, okay, so probably 8.3 or something like that. Yeah. I mean, I could add support for that because obviously 9.0 came in with PG control, whereas in 8.3 it's Postmaster, I think is the correct one for it, for sorting and clusters and stuff. But that shouldn't be too difficult a thing. I'll have to figure out. Unfortunately, anything before 9.1, 9.3 is now not supported by Postgres at all. So it's sort of, it's a thing of do I need to support the other ones or but. Yeah, it's a test framework would be great for testing that it works, doesn't it? But yeah, okay, so we can do that. So I've still got another 15 minutes. Do you want another 15 minutes? Where have I gone? Yeah, another 15 minutes. So I'll go over the Nginx ones unless there's any more questions. Yeah, okay, so Nginx. It's actually almost as easy as Postgres. It's 3 commands in this because you have to create the config file, but you don't have to create any extra bits like you do in Apache. So just a basic config file for that. So this is it. So auto number of worker processes, but you can set that to whatever you need. A PID file, an error log file. It does actually go completely ape if you miss that. And an events block, which is weird because I don't need anything in it because everything that it requires in it has a sensible default. But if you don't have that block there, it just will not start and it doesn't have a logical error for it. It took me about an hour to figure out what the hell it was wanting. And then just a HTTP block with a particular server listing on the folder you need. So very, very similar to Apache. Access log, there isn't one actually externally. There is only an error log out there, and I think if you don't have this one, it doesn't log anything for the HTTP, just global. So putting them to the same is fine because it just concatenates to the end, appends to the end, sorry. and in this sort of testing thing, it doesn't actually matter that much. That bit's nice and simple. And then to start it, Nginx homedir.p is the I think the Nginx server root, and then the conf file relative to that server root. And to actually stop it, it's just signal stop, restart, reload.
Why do you have to give it the conf the second time around?
Because otherwise you won't know where all the PID files are. So the conf file, obviously, it contains the PID file and all those bits of extra configs. And if you don't tell it where it is, it's going to go, huh? What? What do you want me to do? I'll just kill the default one for you then. If you've accidentally run this on production, oops. Especially if you've got escalated privileges or something like that, don't run these under root. Standard caveat supply. Now, the one problem with Nginx, or benefit, if you look at it this way, is you have to compile all the modules into it. So you don't need to do anything like you need with Apache for the mods enabled and mods available. But you will have to have your Nginx compiled with the modules you want. Obviously, you can run this you can compile it and run it. I think you can install it into your home dir with prefix / etc. or whatever. However, this is actually changing. So in 1.9.11, they actually introduced dynamic modules, so you can load and unload modules on the fly on reload. However, you have to compile them at the same time as you compile Nginx. So you have to compile all the modules you want in, and then you can include and exclude the files. In fact, you set include a module for, let's say, MIME. And then if you remove that from the config file and then press reload, it will actually take that out of the runtime. Wow, that took less time than I thought it did. Any questions on Nginx? Unfortunately, I've not managed to get to that for actual module things, because Postgres was my first pass, because I need that for something in production.
I may have missed, if you said, I apologise. When you're, say, generating a config file for the Nginx, are you actually generating it as part of this, or are you expecting to find one that's lying around on disk already?
Oh, this is actually, so
you're using this?
This is actually one you've written. So vim save spin up nginx.com.
So I was sort of wondering, if you're using this, I suppose in my imagination, you create a temporary directory, that literally is some
transient
random string type directory, chuck config files in it, spin the thing up, all the logs, everything goes into that temporary directory.
Yep.
The individual rips it down.
Yeah.
And is that what's happening?
So yes, in test instance Apache, that's what's happening. In this is actually Nginx testing on my home dir, on my testing VM on there. But yeah, it's equivalent. I need to be able to see what's going on. In fact, MySQL made me cry. Ubuntu comes with what the hell's it called? It's not audit check. It's the one that denies you trying to do things outside of certain directories. It's the AppArmor. That's the one. Thank you. AppArmor. So the AppArmor default configs for MySQL does not allow you to start it in your home directory at all, even with a config file there as an unprivileged user on an unprivileged port. You have to do it in /temp. Thankfully, it gives you /temp. So I just went cd/temp. Right, okay. There is actually also a test. I forgot about that. I should have put that one in. There is actually a test module for MySQL, but that one's even worse than that. So if I go over here, that's not the right button. Doop-a-doo. F11. On the fly. This should come up with it. So if you need to search for anything Perl, metacpan is so much better than search.cpan.org because it has all the extra bits and pieces that have come out in the actual Perl community over the last few years. Where's my mouse gone? There. Doop-a-doo. So just a quick bit. Obviously, you got straight links to the repository, show of how many tests are running. Tests have been running, and that's 470, not tests, but actual passing configurations. So actually, if let's open that there. Come on, open a new tab. There we go. So test MySQL is again fairly simple. They actually default to telling you to skip networking on that, or skip all your tests if it actually errors. So that if for example MySQL is actually an option in your test framework, you can just say, well, if I haven't got it installed, don't bother testing it. I don't generally do that because generally MySQL is, if I'm using this test, it's a dependency of the code base. And then, so with your previous question of how to connect to it, both test Postgres and test MySQL, they give you a DSN option, and I think the other one will let you pass in a database name. And then you can just pass that to DBI and then do what you need with it. Stupid thing. And then obviously this also gives you an option to do that. Test MySQL is an extra function of an array. So you can actually spin up multiple MySQLDs for it. So if you're testing multi-master, you can do it with it. I never tried that, and I don't know how arcane it is. Until recently, when's the release date on this one? I think that contains the fix for it, but until recently, this wouldn't actually spin up a MySQL 5.6 and 5.7, where they changed away from initdb and used their own -- initialize on the MySQL command line. So when you initialize a database, it used to use an initdb, MySQL initdb, similar to how Postgres used to do it with a separate script. And then MySQL have combined it into their own thing. MariaDB still have initdb, which meant that this broke entirely, would not start anything that was newer than like the last like 3 years for MySQL. I think they got a patch in, they finally got a patch in for that, but that took a while, and I haven't checked to see if it worked. And also the person was unresponsive for like 3 or 4 years, so sod it. Something's not happy here. So, I've forgotten where the bits are. Yeah, it doesn't really have many other options. I'm trying to think what other possible bits and pieces would be useful. I mean, there are any other? So with my module, I'd actually it's disappeared. Where's it gone? Where the hell have you gone? It's there. If I do that. Play. So, were there any other bits? Things. So obviously, test instance Postgres is my next one that's going to come out. Nginx I'm planning after that, probably with a few patches for the Apache one, because I've got half my tests are actually failing because it's running on servers that don't have Apache installed, so that kind of automatically dies. Okay, that's going to die. Test instance MySQL is next because, frankly, we need something that's not going to hurt. Test instance Projector, or maybe test instance defenestration. What else would people find useful with that sort of thing? What do you think would be useful to have as a simple spin up and go in a test framework? Either that you've encountered that people need to do in there, either on your systems or you need to do in development, or just in general, have you got an interest?
Tomcat, I suppose.
Tomcat?
My next question
Tomcat's
was
Java, isn't it?
Yeah, well, my next question was actually going to be about performance of these things, as in, it's a while since I've spun up and shut down on Apache on the fly. Is it acceptable performance for the unit tests where you want to code test? Is it slowing you down?
Depends on the speed of your dev environment. If you're running it on a single core 1 gig thing, it's okay. If you're running one test, it adds, well, if you completely manage to crash Apache out, it adds 40 seconds to your runtime. But when I'm doing single tests, assuming you haven't got much extra bits to spin up, it's about 2 seconds for a test. So it doesn't take long at all. I think actually,
that's sort of acceptable if you're going to run 50 tests and you're only firing up Apache at the start. And
yeah,
it's surrounding infrastructure run 50 times.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually going to quickly look this up because, as I say, I'm a sensible person and I'm doing it in Travis, which seems to not be responding right now. Oh, come on, play nice. There we go. Yeah, it's been a while since I've looked at this module. But there you go, yeah, that's running under all of them. Let's have a look at the latest one. There we go, running all the tests, which all, that one doesn't actually spin one up. That doesn't spin one up. That does spin one up and then kills it and makes sure it's dead. That makes sure the modules are run. So those two are actually included, actually spin up a full Postgres to then check that it works and come back. In fact, the bits you saw in earlier, of Apache, yeah. And the whole all those tests take 6 seconds. The test framework I've got on one of my client systems, it takes, if I don't do it concurrently, it's about 30 seconds, but that includes a full spin up of it's a mod Perl system, so a standard restart of their web servers takes 15 seconds. And at least with this, if it take, I think I might actually put an option in that to not bother with term int kill and just do kill -9 because you don't care after it's gone. just boom, gone.
It's funny actually because I was just thinking through that in the system I'm working with recently, Tomcat, and that's remarkably slow. But it's the shutdown that's slow. It can take 30 seconds or more. But actually, if it's a test one in a temporary directory and you just
yeah.
9 if I can.
Yeah, I mean the only thing you have to make sure of, and this is something that took me a while to find the actual bug of, is if the thing that the file handle that's got hold of your temporary directory goes out of scope before your Apache destroy goes off, Apache won't even kill -9. So if you RM the server root before it's died, it doesn't know what to do and won't die. So that was a fun bug I found. Actually, I think it does respond to a kill -9 eventually.
Generally, a process can't protect itself against -9. If something won't shut down on a -9, it's because the operating system is waiting for I/O or something like that. Like
Yeah.
the disk has gone away. Or
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay.
So
I may have had it. May have just been taking forever and being issues.
The other thing to be careful of on things like that is half-closed sockets, and that can prevent your next test from running.
Yes. So with
stuck in FinWake 2.
right with this, it actually spins up in a completely separate, non-existent before then temp directory. So if it's got any sockets open in that folder,
Yeah, okay. Unix sockets, because usually, but
yes.
TCP sockets,
you've got to wait 30 seconds.
You've got to wait.
otherwise,
yeah,
yeah, and that's a real pain.
yeah.
Digitally closed properly.
Yeah, I mean, this has no fixed IP, fixed ports. You can fix a port if you want to. This actually uses a module called, where's my mouse gone again? There we go. Doesn't play nice, this one. There we go. This uses a module called net empty port, which when you call the function empty port, it passes you a port that's not tied to anything. There is a race condition there, but as long as you do to empty port, try it. If it dies, try it again. But this is also a random port rather than a next incremental port, so it's going to be it's in the high end because it will also only give you one above. I think it's 1,900 is. Oh, I can't. What's the? Pardon?
Well, 1,025.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know quite where it starts. I've not bothered looking at the module because it works. The test pass on that. Excellent. I think actually that's me. Coffee break. Come on. There we go.